And with that, we'll hand over the conversation to Michael. Michael, are you able to join? Okay. Then if you were able to join, then we can add you, and then hopefully you're able to join from another device soon. But I want to pose the question towards the panelists till then. If there's Dr. Mitchell, if there's anything, Dr. Dugan, Pastor Dale, if there's anything that you would want to share about your background that maybe was not mentioned in the introductions, we would love to hear as well a little bit more about your backgrounds. So yeah, Dr. Mitchell, if you want to go ahead and start.
Certainly. You said quite a bit, so thank you very much. Of course, I'm a ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. Been doing community work for a number of years. One of my most important things is that helping churches and church leaders in particular to become more mission focused and help them develop the skills that they need so that congregations can be sustainable and return to being the hub of communities. I'm originally from Chicago, currently living in Atlanta. Not in either of those places right now, but I think it's vital. I think this is a time where we need to be about the business of transformation and transitioning into different ways of being church and being sustainable that uplifts the community.
Absolutely. Dr. Dugan.
I thought you were going to go in the same water. Um, I would just say I was 28 years that I served the church. I was in ordained in the Baptist church, and I noticed Dr. Dennis, my church, the church I was ordained in was Solid Rock Baptist Church. Used to be in Jamaica, New York, so I guess we have a connection. From New York, born and raised, living in North Carolina the last 3 years. And this is work I've been doing for most of my adult life. Learned about 8 years ago that my grandfather did this work. So I'm, his name was Sam Jones, and he was a fire baptized holiness preacher who built churches all around the country. So I'm Sam Jones in real life, but my grandfather. So I'm just glad to be here and appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. And I think Michael is able to join. Um, we can't hear you, Michael.
Gotta unmute.
Muting. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's Michael Marshall in Rochester, New York. As indicated, I'm a seminarian student at Colgate Rochester Crozer Divinity School. I'm a social justice activist with the Poor People Campaign. And I serve on ministry at a Baptist church. My calling is social justice ministry, and I do believe in working with the disenfranchised, marginalized members of our community and advocacy work in that area.
And Dale, I think you also, if there's anything you would want to share as well before I hand over the conversation to Michael and our questions.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to share and to be in such amazing company. Indeed, I'm honored to be a part of this platform as we share together in this conversation. My ministry work has extended for over 2/3 of my life, and I'm excited about that opportunity to continue to share with what we are pouring into our local communities and how we empower our leaders, our clergy persons, and our congregations to be more active and more engaged in the political climate of this world, as well as involved in how we can develop our communities for effective operations moving forward. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, Michael, you can, if you're able to join.
I'd like to just open framing this conversation. We'd like to emphasize that the Black Church is not only a spiritual institution, but a historical agent of survival, resistance, formation, and community transformation. I think that one of the opening questions that I would like to start off with is, what do you see as the most urgent role of the Black Church in shaping justice and community power today? And I'd put that question to the entire panel. Were you all able to hear that? I'm sorry, how much of that last question were you able to hear?
I think it's a little, your connection's a little weak, but I was able to hear the question where the panel was able to hear.
Yeah.
I heard you.
Yes.
Go ahead, Patrick. Dr. Dugan?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Certainly, Doctor. What do you see the most urgent role of the Black Church in shaping justice and community power today?
The witness. I think, what's most important right now is resisting the easy path of panic, fear, dismay that is intentionally being put out upon us, not just among Black folks, but everybody. I think the challenge for us all is to keep our heads and focus on what got us through slavery, civil rights, and all of the eras and developments in this country that we've been through since 1619 and before that. We are resilient, and we have the ability to go do things with nothing. So I think we should rely on our historic strength, wisdom, and the power of our ancestors to drive us forward and drive us through this at this time. So we need to we need to discipline ourselves and not get caught up in the noise and the crazy, and to focus on where God is leading us.
Yes. I would like to add to that. I think the church has always been the hub of the Black community. And being the hub of the Black community, one of our roles was to help us focus and understand our why and our purpose and develop a critical mass. We do not have a critical mass in what we deem the Black church. And so it's very difficult for us to achieve particular things in our society, justice issues, community issues, if we are not all moving in the same direction, or at least a critical mass moving in the same directions. We won't always ever move all of us together, but we need a critical mass, and I think that's very lacking. To be honest, we have accepted American society and American ways, and we have adapted and adopted them. And we're struggling right now to let loose some of those things and get back to our African roots and our Black history in the church here in this country. As Dr. Dugan pretty much said, way back when we first were brought over here in enslavement, we had a singular focus, and that was to be free. I think that still should be our focus, is to be free, because we're not free yet.
I think it's essential for us in this season to one, reclaim our voice, to get back to the place where we're not just about Sunday morning worship, fellowship, and gathering. We've mastered Sunday morning, but then we're muted on Monday. And so regaining that place in community where the Black church was not just the gathering place, but was the moral compass. That we held the power of being able to galvanize our community to push us toward excellence. And as Dr. Mitchell mentioned, that togetherness, that even though we had our own doctrinal differences, even though we had our own differences in worship styles, we were unified in the thought that we can be better than where we are. And so getting back to that place where we recognize that it's not just about gathering on Sunday, but about governing how we deal with our impact in our local communities. Are we getting back to the place of partnerships with one another, with community organizations? And somewhere along the line, we've kind of gotten lost and we've gotten comfortable and complacent with being inspirational. But now we have to build the infrastructure to do the work that we're being called to.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dale. Dr. Susan, I would like to follow up with that question for you. How do we cultivate leaders who are spiritually grounded, politically aware, and equipped to change, or equipped for change?
Well, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that we need some instruction, and we need to change. Change is difficult in most for anybody. Change is a long haul. So we really have to determine that we're ready for transformation, ready to change. But then we also have to provide tools that assist each of us, whether they be about education, experiences, to move into leadership positions. I think that we also, one of the things that we don't do anymore, or not as a critical mass, we haven't really mentor people to take our place. We do not do that, which we should be doing. We certainly should be mentoring young people with the skill set to take our place and training them to take our place, rather than trying to hold on to power or position until Jesus comes again, if you will. And we do that so often. And there are lots of ways to do that. There are lots of many services out there. We need to stop focusing on what we call butts and seats and all that kind of stuff, but really get back to empowering, impacting our community, and inviting. Here's the thing: inviting people into leadership, which we don't usually do. Usually a leader just comes up or whatever, but we need to invite them into leadership and help train them and walk with them, and then move out the doggone way, so that they can, assume the leadership skills and power.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Dr. Dugan, just to further that trial of thought, how should the Black church think about economic power as a theological and justice issue?
You're muted, Pat.
I'm sorry, I was saying that we need to stop thinking about money as unholy, as this we got church and then we deal with the money over here, because the church is supposed to care for, and this has always been an element of the Black church. It's about the whole person. It includes your bank account. It includes your ability to build wealth. Our church, the Black church, really started. A big chunk of it was about being an institution in the community that can meet the needs of the folks. It's where the first uh, insurance happen. Black insurance companies, mutual aid societies, burial money. Um, and from that, in the church came Black insurance companies. It was a place where you went to meet a mate, or to find a job. It has always been uh, uh, one thing. It's not like, the job stuff is over here and the worship is over there and the money is over here. It's about being an institution that's holistic, where it's not a division between what's divine and what's so-called secular. That's a colonizer's thinking. And because if we don't have economic power, we're always at the mercy of systems that weren't built for us. And Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it more abundantly. So economic agency is a part of our spiritual and political freedom.
Thank you, Dr. Dugan. And again, along the same line of thinking, Reverend Dennis, what are some of the barriers or the greatest barriers preventing congregations from moving from political awareness to sustained political action to further this development and growth that uh, Dr. Dugan spoke about?
So I think there are several factors. One, I think, is fear. I think that we deal with the real fear of hearing that if you are too political, you stand at risk of losing your nonprofit status. You have the fear of, if we speak too strongly about this truth, we'll lose our audience. If I share and I open this space up to this demographic, I'll lose people, I'll lose financing, I'll lose funding. Then you also have the reality of fatigue. People are tired. Um, um, Superman deserves to be able to be Clark Kent some days. And for a long time, the Black church and the Black preacher it has been insisted that you be available 24/7 and that you give. And then you never have that moment where you can recoup and recover. And so now people are tired. We're tired of creating strategies. We're tired of figuring it out. If we've navigated through COVID and now we're in this governmental crisis and now we're at war and now we have this, that, and the third on our plate, people are legitimately tired. But then you also have, I believe, the barrier of forgetfulness, that we have forgotten who we are as the Black church. We have forgotten what our mission is. We have forgotten our assignment. We have forgotten who we come from. We've forgotten the power and the strength of our foremothers and forefathers. We've forgotten the power and the strength of the community of being the Black church. We've also forgotten who we're fighting for. We're not fighting anymore for the poor, the least, the lost, and the left out. Now we're fighting for position, and now we're fighting for greater authority. We're fighting to make sure that our name is known in certain circles and spaces. And those are barriers for us to keep us from limited or restricted, rather, to just talking about it rather than being the feet and being the hands of God in the world. And so I think that we're at a place now where we recognize that people are scared, people are tired, but then people are also forgetful.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you an amen there, Rev, on that, the hands and the feet business. And I would just like to chime in from my background and training of a womanist perspective. I think it's important that we understand that the sanctuary should be understood not only as a spiritual comfort, but as a place for protection, mutual aid, truth telling, and collective strategy. And that's to say that the political consciousness in the Black church is part discipleship, helping people understand that faith speaks to voting rights, education, labor, healthcare, housing, and dignity of Black life. So, from a womanist point of view, that would be an intersectional analysis where all these different areas of social, political, culture, spiritual life intersect and come together. So I think that that would be a very important part to take into this conversation. Dr. Mitchell, for you, I would like to just go back to this question of what does it look like for the church to align its internal structures with justice commitments?
Hmm, That's a good question. Um, First of all, we really like to get out and march for economic equity. We like to get out and march for inclusion. We like to get out and march for freedom of speech. Um, but then when we look inside our churches, is there economic equity among the leadership? As you mentioned, from a womanist perspective, do the female pastor get as much as the male pastor? How about that? What does leadership look like? Is it spread among the many and the qualified, or is it just the traditional patriarchal leadership style? Are there young leaders involved and engaged? Um, we always want to talk about how we want to keep the church going and we need youth inside of our churches, but then we do not give youth designated space. They are not participating in the leadership for real, not just in a token position, but being a part of real decision making. Um, on every leadership council, every ministry, every the finances, everything. We should engage our young people in that way so that they understand what the purpose of the Black church is. They understand what the mission of the Black church, and they understand how to move the Black church forward in terms of freedom for our community. And so when we look at those kinds of things that we're out there holding signs and marching for and standing and fussing about, we need to look inside. Internal should reflect our external. And right now it's not doing that. And I think that's very important, a place to start. Um, but it's hard because we have gotten so accustomed to the ways that we have learned in this country. And we have just modeled what was out there instead of relying on our own historical understanding, our own ancestral understanding of how leadership happens. And so when we are able to match our internal with what we're out there protesting externally, then I would say we're ready to um, um, our church are ready to fulfill their justice commitments.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. I'm going to switch over here to Dr. Dugan. When we're looking at the material conditions of Black life and how it matters to God, so as we're talking about housing, land, wages, debt, transportation, childcare, healthcare, and any myriad of issues that affect the Black community, which are not outside of the church's concern, um, but it's part of our Black life that we need to preserve and protect. So, to that point, Dr. Dugan, what should affordable housing redevelopment and impact investment be? Why should affordable housing redevelopment and impact investment be seen as core ministries of the church? So, for example, Dr. Mitchell was giving us the more of the micro and the more internal look of the dynamics of the church. But let's take the church out into the community and into the larger society. What say you to that?
So the church is not just a building where people should gather on Sundays and maybe Wednesday evening for Bible study or something. It's a community institution. We have to understand it as an institution. Most of our churches have been there for decades, some for hundreds of years. So we're institutions and a stable anchor in the community. So when you're in the community and the people are being priced out of their own blocks, the church has a moral obligation to use its land and its capital to keep them there. It's what it looks like to actually love your neighbor. You want them to be your neighbors. You want to protect. It's not okay, that's secular. We don't get into that. It is a essential uh, element of who we are as a church. Um, and the fact of the matter is, if the institution that's been there for decades, serving the community, is silent while gentrification marches forward, what is that saying to the community in terms of who the church is? So it's important for us to not push those things because they're hard. They're difficult to do. These big projects, takes a lot of money, time, but we need to see those as part of the church's portfolio. It's not something that is on the outside that we need to figure out. Who do we get to do it? We need to do it. We need to be at the center of moving those kinds of initiatives and projects and getting the help we need, the technical assistance we need from the folks who can do that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dugan. I'm going to go back to you, Reverend Dennis. Earlier, you spoke about the demands and the stresses that are placed on the Black community as a whole and within the structure of the life of the Black church. So I would like to propose to you, how would pastors equip their congregations for civic engagement without reducing their ministry to partisanship? So in other words, let's keep up the activism, let's keep up the momentum of civic life and engagement, but how does that impact the life of the church and your role as a minister?
I think it's important for us to remember that in our engagement is based not on a party, but on our values. And so how we respond to people and how we respond to the needs of our communities should never be based on a political party, but rather on the principles. Are we standing with those who have been marginalized? Are we fighting for those that have been systemically oppressed? Are we fighting for those who find themselves in the very things that caused the Black church to need to be birthed in the first place? The reason the Black church exists is because Black worshipers were ostracized and minimized in places of worship. And so now, how do we shift? Because the reality is that the Republican Party of today was the Democratic Party of yesteryear, and how the roles have been significantly reversed. And so we can't get caught in party lines, because if we get caught in party lines, we'll miss out on the entire principle of the values that we're supposed to share. And so it's important for us to talk about human dignity. It's important for us to talk about access to resources. It's important for us to talk about justice. Those are the things that Jesus called us to. Jesus did not call us to be Republican or Democrat. I do not believe I wholeheartedly do not believe that Jesus would have fit into either of those labels. I think that the true Jesus of the Bible and of our faith would find himself somewhere in the middle, somewhere where there are aspects of each party based on values that mattered most. Because again, our priority should be people and not systems and not structures, but our priority should be helping uplift people and guiding them through navigating how to be a part of the policy changes that are necessary, so that we're making decisions based on the well-being of people, and not necessarily on status and position. And let me add,
Wow. Uh, I hope
even
the
in the
folks,
life of the
I'm
church,
sorry.
even in the life of the church, we're very political. I don't care what denomination or organization you go to, we're very political. But how then do we shift from being so political that we've missed out on the mark of meeting people's needs? And so recognizing where to draw the boundary line and say, we can't cross this line, not for the sake of a political party, but where do we find ourselves so that we're actively engaging people where they are and helping them become better.
Thank you, Reverend Dennis. I'm sorry if I cut you off there. I was just getting really excited by the inspiration of what you were saying, and I hope that the our audience is really taking all this in because there's a lot of stuff being covered here. Um, One of the things that I've been thinking about, and what you reminded me of, Reverend Dennis, is that transformational ministry requires more than just charismatic leadership, but it requires structures that form, shape, and sustain leadership across generations and roles. So, leadership should not only be seen in the pulpit, but through organizing teachers, administrators, caregivers, lay leaders, people who build communal power. And so, with that in mind, I think I'm going to go back to Dr. Mitchell and ask you um, what, let's see here, what practical shifts can help churches move from maintenance mode to movement mode? This would be directed to Dr. Mitchell.
One of the first things I've been thinking about the conversation thus far, and one of the things I would think to move from maintenance mode to movement mode is we need to move from being a personality dependent church to a collective leadership church. And when I mean collective leadership, I mean that we have to move, that leaders come by their skill set and not because they could close a sermon, but because of what they can do in terms of being active and acting in the community. We need to move from maintenance mode to movement mode when we really reach out into the community. So many times, I've worked with congregations, and this is not specific to any denomination, but it is widespread, where the church would say, I asked the question, are you involved in your community? And they say, oh yeah, we're engaged in the community. And then we go into the community and the community say, oh no, we don't know nothing about that church. We know where it is, but we don't know anything what they do. Now they know that they may serve, turkey dinners, or they may give out a Christmas basket and those kinds of things, but there's no collaboration with, not for, but with the community. There's no action with the community. If we want to move into movement, we definitely have to be in the community. We have to go to the community meetings. We have to go to the community governing bodies. We have to actively engage in all of those arenas in order to get into a movement mode. Nothing changes without action. You can't sit there and preach from the pulpit and expect things to change in the community. It's not going to happen. We got to reach out and be engaged, whether it's you personally as the leadership or some folk that are ready to engage the community and be liaisons for the community to the church. So many times we don't empower the community. We create programs and services that we think the community will need, but we haven't asked them one thing what they need. And I think that's very important. You get out there and ask, talk to people, build relationships. We stopped doing that. Everybody got their seat in the church, and you come to the church and you sit with the same people every day. You don't even know the people 4 pews behind you. That is not how we get into a movement mode. Um, the other thing that we need to do is we need to be mission focused. Oh my goodness. What is your mission? It can't be the same thing from when you was founded in 1853. It's got to be something else. I mean, times have changed. Culture has changed. People have changed. The times have changed. The church really needs to catch up to where the people are because we're still lagging because we're holding on to the way we always done things. And we need to really engage and understand what's happening in the world and really reach out and be a part of the community, not just be that church over there that sits over there somewhere with a name and all this other stuff. So I get on my soapbox if you let me keep talking, but I'm gonna stop.
Well, actually, I'm going to do a follow-up question. And I like you on your soapbox, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
No problem.
I'm going to talk about a little bit of things that I understand from a womanist perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I've been interested in the life of the church and the Black church, and this question can go out to the men. This is not only directed to our sister in our panel, but I want to hear specifically from her. Black women have long served as the backbone of the Black church through organizing, caregiving, praying, teaching, fundraising, mentoring, building churches, sustaining life of churches. You yourself have served in many of these capacities. What is needed now as we talk about this movement, as we talk about this transformation that we're going? What has to happen in the Black church and the way women are treated, understood, and perceived? If you would like to speak to that, and if any of the um, other panelists would like to follow up,
You know, that goes all the way back to biblical times. Women financed Jesus' movement. So, but rarely are they mentioned in the Bible. Come on. That's an easy thing. If we really want to believe in equity, let's be equitable. Let's live that out. Let's model that in the church. Let's help get that modeled in the community. Let's help elect some females to offices. Let's treat um, women the same way you treat men pastors, the way you finance and pay for them, or whatever you do. It's really about equity. I mean, I could I can go on and on, but it's embedded in this American culture, and we have solely bought into this doggone American culture that even when we created the Black church, all we did was model what the white church was doing. And so when there was no women in leadership in the white church, we created the Black church, and there was no women's leaders in the Black church, and we're still fighting that battle, which is really ridiculous in 2026. And so if you really want to talk about from a woman's perspective, I think the men should be answering this question, because they're the ones continuing on this whole patriarchal deal. So what y'all gonna do? That's what I want to know. You hold the power. Are you helping women get into leadership positions? What y'all doing? That's my question. I mean, we continue to support the church. We continue to finance the church. You can look at statistics. Who's financing the church? There's more women than it is men. I mean, that's real data. So my question is to y'all brothers. What you doing? How you gonna help?
well, see how I'm still not a minister just yet. I'm going to hand that question over to Dr. Dugan or Reverend Dennis, because they both have experience in leadership and running churches. And I will put my 2 cents in, but at another point.
Well, first of all, I agree wholeheartedly with what Susan is saying, especially since I got to work with her every day. But no, I agree with it anyway. But I even in the church I was ordained in, Baptist Church in New York. Um, my pastor, this is in the 80s. My pastor was in the 80s in his circle was seen as different because he would ordain women. And today we still have in some of our Black denominations, you have women, but they still face crazy, discrimination from men because, first of all, most of us are older boomers, and we carrying that, same those values that we grew up in into the church, and that's part of we say we want young people. But when we bring all of those older ideas and practices into the church and the young people are leaving, that's why. Because they're not gonna, try to fight to, live a certain kind of way. They'll just leave and go somewhere else. So I think it's gonna require us men to really examine, it's this is all together. It's all about decolonization. That's really the issue. We have colonized minds, and we are resistant to breaking out of it because you know, those churches that are doing well are doing well. And they don't want to upset the apple cart by introducing some other kind of thinking. But I think it's necessary because the women, I'll tell you something, if a lot of people don't know this, the reason that Black people were able to learn to read at a fast rate right after uh, um, the war was civil war was over. Um, I don't remember the stats, but the literacy rate went up really fast during the 10-year period. That was because of the Black women in churches who were putting together all of these programs for children to learn how to read, children and adults to learn how to read. And there's a book on women in the church. Um, don't get me started on which book it is, that chronicles the work of all of the women's groups, the women's societies in churches that helped got us literacy. Okay. So we can't just ignore that leadership. And I tell you what, if we would get out of our own way and let Black women do what they do, the church would be zooming. I mean, it'd be way down, way down the path to where we want to be, because they are the strength of the church now. It's not something that's gonna happen. That's who. If all the women left the church, the Black church, wouldn't be no Black church. We need to realize that, and rather than holding back and holding down women, we need to get out of the way and just let them do what they do. Mm-hmm.
I've often
Thank
wondered.
you, Dr. Dugan. I guess now we're going to hand it over to Reverend Dennis, since you are the younger this person in the group. So I'm going to let you field that question in terms of the role and the impact of women in the church, how it should be handled going forward.
I've often wondered what our Black churches would look like, particularly our Black Methodist connectional churches, what they would look like if they elected a full slate of female bishops. You are lucky and honored and excited that in 2020, I think it was 2000, that Bishop Vashti McKenzie became the first female bishop in Black Methodism. And now 26 years later, if you look across the spectrum of Black Methodist denominations, at most, I believe, and I could be wrong, maybe by one, but at most, at one time, you've only had 3 female bishops active on a bench at any time across the 3 major ones, right? But yet, when you look at the voters and the delegates, they're majority women. And so at some point, we as men have to take accountability for muting our sisters. We've muted our sisters, we've muted our mothers, we've muted our aunties, we have muted them. And as Dr. Dugan said, we have taken the colonizers' systems and structure and we just put blackface on them. We just call it the Black church, but did we really get rid of the practices that caused the need for a Black church? And so my approach to women in ministry and leadership is different because I grew up around it. It was a part of our normal experience in our home church to be able to see women in leadership, women as preachers, as pastors, as leaders, as presiding elders. But then there was always this ceiling. Either it's how high you can go or how many of you can come at one time. And so for me and our generation, that's not a barrier anymore. And so, well, I'll say for some, for many of my peers, that's not a barrier anymore. But for those that have been indoctrinated in organizations where that's the standard, they see no problem with it. And I'm concerned because in my generation, we have to be more proactive in saying you have to change the seating chart at this table. This no longer works for where we're going. It worked there only because it was the only thing that we knew. But I came up in a household of, if you know better, you do better. And so if they don't honor our Black women, we should. If the government ignores them, or if church political structures ignore them, fine. Let them have their party. We're gonna build your own table, and we're gonna have our party over here where we can invite whomever we want to sit at our table. And you can bring whatever meal you want to bring to the table. This is your space, because we recognize that space had to be created for us. And so why then are we restrictive in who we create space for? I believe that it requires us to take accountability in addressing the circumstances and confronting it and calling it out for what it is. We don't have to sit silently, and we don't have to sit on our hands and just let what was continue to be what is, because that's not what we're about. That's not who we were created to be. And so cultivating that space for all voices to matter still makes a huge difference. And so I believe that there's a level of accountability and responsibility that rests on this generation, um, and even the generation of my daughter, to be able to tear down these barriers, that you belong here. It shouldn't be a special celebration because you made it, because you always belonged here. It should be a special celebration that we recognize your value, your humanity, that no matter what the differences are, you belong at this table. And so I think it's critical for us to take accountability and use our influence to make space, because you may not let me in your house. That's fine. I'll build my own, and I'll invite to the house whomever I desire.
Wow, thank you very much, Reverend Dennis. I'm really impressed with the depth and the breadth of our panelists here this evening. I would just like to add, since I posed the question and I am a male, um, I have friends in seminary that are always saying, "Man, why are you always preaching about women? Why you always got women on the topic?" And I would just say that in my life experience of growing up in the Black church, I was very much impressed, moved, and nurtured by the women of the church. And that sense of transformation was spiritual, it was structural, and most importantly, it was relational. And I think, as I understand it, liberation is incomplete if it does not include Black women, if it does not include the poor, people of queer genders and nature, um, workers, elders, the youth, those who have been historically pushed to the edge. So I think it's essential we look at and look up to our women folk, but we have to go beyond that in that form of transformation, because it's the Black church for me is most faithful when it nurtures both healing, resistance, and dignity with collective action. So I think that's my 2 cents on that area. Let's go out a little further here and let's talk in terms of institutional survival to collective flourishing. Many churches are navigating institutional stress, but the goal cannot be survival for its own sake. The question is whether the church is helping the community live, heal, and flourish. So to go beyond survival and to look at really sustainable and structural change within the church, I'm going to pose this question to Dr. Dugan. Um, what does it mean for the church to invest in the material conditions of Black life as an expression of faith?
So when we realize that investing in material condition of Black life is holy, it means that we will have finally changed our binary colonized thinking about religion and money. Because at the end of the day, faith has to show up in the physical world. Faith without works is dead. So it's not enough to pray for somebody's daily bread if we weren't also looking at how they can buy groceries. So we have to invest in the material life of Black health and housing, jobs, because that's how we demonstrate our faith. That's what makes it real, that people see the abundance happening as a result of our efforts. So it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to build an infrastructure around getting to it. And I think that those are the elements that we have to get us there.
Thank you, Dr. Dugan. Dr. Mitchell, following up on that same line of thinking, what are real signs that the church is serious about social transformation?
Real signs. Let's see. I think real signs begin with asking, as we do at Church Building Loan Fund, finding out what your why is. Why do you exist? Why are you in this particular community? Why has God called you together, and for what purpose? Understanding your why is, for me, the beginning of that transformation. Developing a vision and strategic plan of implementation. And remember, I said I add of implementation. Many times churches develop strategic visioning and strategic plans, and they look good, and they decorate them, and they have a beautiful cover, and they put them on the shelf, and nobody implements anything. I think there needs to be a degree of accountability for that. If you're going to set some goals, then somebody's got to be accountable for achieving those goals. That's how you know you are serious. Also, what is your impact? Real impact. Not that you gave out 50 scholarships, but what happened to those young people who got the scholarships? Are they still in school? Did they graduate? What are they doing from there? Some real data about what's happening. Engaging in the community. If you're not engaging the community, you're not ready for no social transformation. You're ready for internal transformation, and that's about all. So you have to do that, and then you have to build for sustainability. Because we believe that money follows mission. You don't have no mission, you don't have no money. And so with that in mind, we're developing a program we call it Dese Church, which we call the entrepreneurial church. And so churches should be entrepreneurial. Why can't the church own the local grocery store so that it makes sure it meets the needs of the community and not another just Dollar General? How about that? Why can't the church and then employ people in the community and people in the church if they're not in the community? Our churches are filled with people who live in a variety of different communities because we all have cars and we can go where most of us can go where we want to go. We drive 30, 40 minutes to a church versus a church that's in our neighborhood. But if each church is doing those things, understanding their mission, their why, they develop and implement, I'm going to say it again, implement a strategic plan with accountability. And then look at some of the things. What are their resources? What are they doing with their land? I mean, what are you doing with your land? Do you have a school on your land? Do you have affordable housing on your land? Where people in the community, I mean, a real affordable housing, where people in the community can live there. Not people outside the community, but people actually in the community can live there. And what are you doing? Look at that budget. Where's the money spent? I'm not trying to be funny, but is it spent on choir robes, carpeting, or whatever it is? Let's look at that. Your finances tell the tale. It tells the tale as an individual and it tells the tale as a church. Um, and if we don't have those foundation things, some of the things that we did not learn in seminary is how to be a good administrator. You got to know the finances of the church. You have to know how to invest. You have to know how to understand the property of the church and what it can do as a resource. But there are opportunities to learn those things now. So there's no reason why we can't do it. Um, I think there should be classes in seminary about it because those are things we're not learned. We don't learn how to do a budget and maintain a budget instead of being in the red. So, you know, I think that's where it begins. Mission, vision, strategic planning, entrepreneurial church, all those wonderful things. You have to be a part of it and you have to engage the community.
Well, Dr. Mitchell, if I can come work for you once I graduate from seminary, I would be very honored to take some wisdom knowledge from you. I'm going to continue in this same line of collective flourishing with Reverend Dennis. Now, when we're talking about the future of the Black church, it seems that it would require new partnerships, new economic models, and ways of using resources and services of the common good. As a young, dynamic leader in your community and in your church, can you speak to some of these new partnerships, new economic models that you think would have a greater impact? And that's for Reverend Dennis.
I think that we have to stop being afraid to work together. Just because we partner together does not mean that you've lost your history, your heritage, and your identity. We can do more together. Just because I ball my hand up into a fist does not mean that the index finger has stopped being the index finger or the ring finger has stopped being the ring finger. We've gotten to this place where we think that I got to be isolated in order to maintain my identity. You can still pull up to the table of the family reunion and still be exactly who you are, but you're adding to the conversation that's happening. And so the sharing of resources and the sharing of partnerships is essential. We cannot do ministry in isolation. When you burn out, then what? Then the ball drops and people aren't served. Or the pastor dies in the work and they mourn you for 30 days. They might give you 45, and then they'll elect the next one, or they'll send another one. And so the reality is knowing that we can build partnerships that honors who each of us is individually, while still reflecting on our common goal. I think that we must return to getting back to the place of identifying those common goals. What is it that we're all united about? What is it that we all agree on? Yes, we might differ on, and this is one of the things that I use for our leaders. Yes, we might differ on our doctrinal stances about how baptism is performed, or the methods and the modes of baptism. But when we look at our creeds, there are some non-negotiables. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. There are certain aspects that I must hold to, but the moment that we begin to I might get in trouble here. The moment that we begin to lean more into oneness versus Trinitarian, rather than making sure that my neighbor has a meal, not just for Thanksgiving, but for the time the not that what the 10 months before November, making sure that our communities are served. And so we've mastered majoring in the minors and trying to say that we're doing ministry. But you can't do ministry alone. And even in independent churches, even in autonomous ministries, you can maintain your autonomy and still be connected to something bigger than you, because ultimately the goal of ministry is bigger than each individual congregation. It's too big for one person to carry this load alone. And for a long time, we've left it on the Black preacher. You be my child's parent, so that I don't have to be my child's parent. But then who's my child's parent while I'm being your child's parent, right? Who's covering my family while I'm serving and covering yours? And so that's where that partnership matters. Um, our church doesn't have as many resources as the next church, but we have some things that the next church doesn't have. So if we share together, we're meeting needs of people beyond our local church. And at the end of the day, my goal is not just to, yes, every pastor wants to say, yes, our church is growing. But my goal is not to grow a church. My goal is to grow the kingdom, and the kingdom supersedes the local church. So if I feed you and you go join a church 10 miles away, I'm still as excited as I would be if you joined my church. Because at the end of the day, a need was met, a soul was changed, was saved, and a life was transformed. And so recognizing that partnership requires responsibility, that we have to respect other people's differences, even where we don't agree. Accepting the fact that there will be different perspectives that come to the table, that not all of us were raised in the 60s or the 70s. Some of us were raised, we have children now who missed 5 years essentially of life because of COVID-19. And so they don't have remembrances of what our lives were like before there was a COVID experience. Now, if I look at a movie and I see people sharing a payphone in a phone booth, it's strange now because post COVID, it's like we did all kinds of things back then, right? And so honoring what has been, but while realizing that there must be some transformation. That no, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. No, we don't always agree on everything the same, but we have more in common than we have different. And commonalities, we all get hungry. We all get thirsty. We all desire shelter. We all desire to be safe. And so, why then am I hung up on oneness versus Trinitarian while our brothers and sisters don't have meals? Why then am I hung up on who's a bishop, who's an apostle, rather than making sure that children, when school is closed, that rely on school being open to get meals? It bothered me that when we had this big snowstorm and we had to shut down, and there was this constant going back and forth, not realizing that there were kids that depended on school meals. So who served those families in that in between time? We can meet those needs when we partner together. Sorry for my soapbox appeal.
Thank you, Reverend Dennis. So, you guys, we've kind of got a whole bunch of different areas and topics. We've had some really wonderful conversation, but I'm going to go back to Dr. Dugan. In the beginning, you talked a little bit about money, that dirty word, money. So, I think as we go towards the wrapping this up, let's talk a little bit about money. Now, I'm going to frame it in one way, but I would like each of you to speak to what you think the role, impact, or what it is that has happened with the relationship of Black churches, Black life in capitalist society, in empire. But I'm going to frame it with this to say that charity is not enough and that we need to go from service to justice. And we're going to look at it in terms of, I will look at it in terms of prophetic role and how that has informed and shaped the life of the church. But I think with the core understanding of foundational basis being what is the role of economics and money in the life of the church. And I'm going to open it up with you, Dr. Dugan, and uh, and then if you'd like to follow up, Dr. Mitchell, I'd appreciate it.
So, I was in doing some research, looked at the 1890 census and found uh, what they did in the 1890 census that they did for several censuses. They don't do it anymore as a part of the census, but I think there still is an agency that does it, is identify all of the churches in the United States of America by denomination in 1890, by race, so, and by what they owned. And in 1890, when something like 60% of the folks it was a big percentage of the folks were former slaves, right? Or had been enslaved, maybe like 40%, something like it was a big chunk. Black folks, black churches built $26 million in churches. That's how much they owned in property. Okay. Now, if you factor into the fact that just like today, values were depressed where black people live significantly. So the same church in the white neighborhood would be valued 3-4 times as much as the church in the black neighborhood. So I did some research. So that 26 million, if it had been valued the same way the white folks' church buildings were valued, that would be $80 million in assets that were owned by black people, because they were all black because they were segregated, right? In 1890. That would be like $3 billion today. Okay. Now, some of those churches aren't around, some of them are. That's a long time ago. But think about it. These are folks who put together pennies. People didn't make big money. They understood, all of us, the value of the collective. Three of us can't build a church, but if all 100 of us give a penny a week or whatever amount it was, we can do it. They didn't have loans. They get no loan. They might get some money from, massa. The good white folks might give you $5. You know what I mean? But it was mostly us. There wasn't no question about, you know, the denomination. Everybody agreed we need to be collective, no matter what denomination it was. There was that energy. Okay. And interesting that coming out of hardship, right, coming out of slavery, we didn't have to remind ourselves that we had to be a collective. We knew it. It was evident. I think we can learn from our ancestors that we have to rely on ourselves and our resources and our genius, and know our history and learn from our history and apply it today. Because if we're going to, and your question was around, see, I'm losing the topic. Was it around money and spirit? Okay. There's no division there, and we shouldn't see one, and we should be excited and desiring to think of ways that we can come together, and through our coming together, make a dent in the issues that we're facing today. I think that's the only way to look at it. I don't know if that answered the question, but I'll turn it over to whoever's next.
That did answer the question. I gave a very broad sweeping question, but
It
Dr.
did.
Mitchell, take it over.
So, what has come to mind to me is just the other day, in a community that's near me, we have created what they have deemed the new Black Wall Street. A group of Black folk purchased an old Target building, and they recreated inside streets and with shops and stuff like that based on the Black Wall Street. This opened up many years ago, and it was booming when it first opened up. Now, mind you, it's right next to a mall. And I went there the other day and it's practically empty. And I'm like, you know, there's more cars at the mall, and we talking about Black community. There's more cars at the mall than there is at the new Black Wall Street. Who had shops, restaurants, grocery store, had all that, everything you wanted in there. And so for me, it was very disappointing. But for me, it's like we haven't learned or recaptured that sense of economic empowerment to support our own community, our own businesses that rely on, like we have to have shop in your community day or whatever, or we have to have buy black week or whatever, which makes no sense to me. Um, you should be buying black every day. It shouldn't be, during February or whatever it is. We should be putting our our resources right back into our community like other ethnic communities do, like other racial communities do. And we don't do that. Um, I focus on the Kwanzaa principle Ujamaa, collective work and responsibility. And it's a principle that we like to celebrate in the Black church because we celebrate Kwanzaa after Christmas. After we go we spend all our money, then we celebrate Kwanzaa and want to buy a book for a kid after we done spent lots of money on other things. But do we really embrace and internalize and live out those principles? Um, I think that's important. It shouldn't just be at the end of December going into January. It should be all year round. We have an abundance, and we have to stop thinking what the world says, scarcity, and our faith tells us there's an abundance. So either you're gonna live by what the world says is scarcity, or you're gonna live by what your faith tells you and what you have seen in your own lives and the lives of our ancestors. There's an abundance. And if we would just hone in on that principle of Ujamaa, I think it would make a big difference. Um, and my thing is like going back to the initial when I started with the new Black Wall Street, what we got several churches, gazillions of churches in that community, and a couple of mega churches in that community. Black folk with money. Why haven't they supported the new Black Wall Street? It's beyond me. It's beyond me. I get very frustrated with that. Um, but I think it's because, we like being American. We like a lot of the values of America. We want to have the big house, the big car, and the latest and the greatest. And it's going to take some time, but I think we all should be about, stripping some of those American values away because American values teach us to have excess, way more than what we need, and not to share what we have with others. And so, that's one of the things that pains me. I don't understand the thought or how we can move that. But I think that's another reason why, I always say this, the Black church owes the Black community reparations. We got to get back in there. We have to.
I hope you all heard that. The Black church owes the Black community reparations. Now, that's something to really sink your teeth into and think about. Um, Dennis, do you want to finish this part of the conversation out, and then we can go into closing remarks?
I love that, Dr. Mitchell. Absolutely. I think that we're now in an age and a posture where we've taken more than we've given. Um, and in this season, I believe that it requires us to be more responsible, and I think that it requires us to make to have some hard conversations and to make some hard decisions, because I don't think it serves the purpose and the mission of the church well, when church the church's bank accounts are running over and the membership is living day to day. The Black church used to lift Black people. Now the Black people are lifting the Black church. And so now, where we used to pool our resources to be a blessing to one another, we're pooling our resources to be a blessing to a building that will more than likely sit closed during the week while the persons who make it up are struggling day to day. I think that we have a responsibility to see money not as demonic, but as a gift, as a tool, as a resource to do greater work. Um, why is it that we have exponential times more, yet we do significantly less? Um, are we really or are we using our resources to feed our communities, or are we relying on somebody else to feed our people? Because if we're relying on others to feed our people, then we leave it to them to shape our community. We've lost the power to shape our community because we've held our money for ourselves. Our salvation is not just individual. It requires a communal experience as well. It requires us to share together. In Acts chapter 2, the church grew exponentially because they did what? They shared what they had in common. People sold their property to make sure that somebody else had what they needed to accomplish. In this generation, there are no more big mama putting the house on the line to save the church. It's me, myself, and I, and you figure it out for you and yours. And so restoring that sense of community, I believe, is necessary, and understanding that we have a collective responsibility for one another. Um, that I cannot call myself a good Christian. I cannot call myself a good person if I see Dr. Dugan struggling and I don't stop what I'm doing to help my brother. I've missed the mark of the faith. I've missed the mark of who we're called to be as a people, right? Not even just our faith, but just being good, decent human beings. We watch one another struggle without stepping in, without the expectation that I can only help this group, or I can only help that group, or I'll only help you if you can help me back down the road. What happened to being genuinely selfless in meeting the needs of others and helping one another? Um, I believe, and this might be a little off, but I believe that we're critically missing the Simon of Cyrene. We're missing the stranger that will help Jesus bear the cross. We've taken it on to ourselves, and we've done our part in making sure that we got what we need. But where are those who are willing to help somebody else bear their cross?
I'm going to do a little bit of a disclosure here. Uh, Reverend Dennis and I attended seminary together, and when I had him in class, I was very impressed with just the discernment and just the seriousness that he took our studies. And so when I was asked to find candidates, I was very much looking forward to having him on this team. And I'm so glad that he brought his wisdom and his insights to this conversation. So, to our panelists, as we get ready to shift over to opening up questions to the audience, our last closing question, and this is to everyone: what is the charge to the church in this moment? What must we remember and what must we do next? And I'm going to let you, Dr. Mitchell, start off with that question.
Uh, what must we, that could be a long laundry list of what we must do next. Ooh, whew. I think one thing we need to do is, I think, I would charge the Black church to do is do a self inventory of what you're really doing. Really look at your ministries, do a self assessment of your finances, your property. You know, what is it? What are you really using your resources for? Is it really mission? Is it internal or is it external? Are you engaging the community? And I go back to Micah, do, love, and walk. Those are all verbs. You got to do justice, not just go and hold up a sign, but actually, do justice in your community. You got to show compassion to people who need it. And we all need some various levels of compassion, you know, and Lord have mercy. Black folk in the Black church, you need to be humble. We're far beyond humble, you know. Be humble. Stop self-promoting. Be about what we're supposed to be about. That's why we were created. We were created to be the hub of the community. People came to the church for everything. Not just a meal, but for, a lawyer, this, somebody, everything. And we're no longer that. And we need to do that. But it takes action, a self-assessment, and then move into action. That's what I'm charging the church with today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. All right. I'm going to let Dr. Dugan answer that. Keep it down to about a couple of minutes, and then we'll go on to Reverend Dennis, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So I hope you guys are getting your questions ready for the panel.
So I was thinking here, listening to Dr. Mitchell, and she talked about doing an inventory. I think it should also ought to audit our imagination. I mean, we gotta think outside of, what are we doing for Women's Month, or what are we gonna do for Men's Day, and what's gonna, we gotta imagine something different. Um, and when it comes to money, we have to think like Nehemiah. He's my biblical hero, because Nehemiah didn't just pray for the walls of Jerusalem. He went to the king and he got some timber and he got some money. And he didn't talk about it. He didn't even do any protesting. He just was about it. So we can't just talk, and we spend a lot of time processing what's in the news, and what how bad things are. We've drunk the Kool-Aid of the constant drone of bad news. We fall right in, we react to it, we talk about it for a few. Meanwhile, that's energy that can go into imagination and planning and doing things that's gonna bring us forward and not just make us mad. So I think we this is almost, when you get to I'm a boomer, as you probably can tell, and I'm always thinking about the mind now, because when you get to this age, you begin to get stuck. You used to doing things a certain way, and that's who the most churches are run by. There's a lot of old folks running churches, and I want to say to those in the audience who might be in this baby boomers mindset, we gotta question the things we hold as, that can't change. Why can't they change? We have to challenge ourselves, and we have to see the possibility of, how we got here together, because we got here together. We didn't just go off and try everything and do, or go off on our own, but we realized that we had to be part of a group of us, and we had to share certain values, as I heard earlier. So I really think that's what we've got to exercise some imagination, and we've got to, you know we've got to think like Nehemiah, because I know there was no way that the king was thinking about redeveloping the Jerusalem ghetto. Somebody had to do it. Somebody else had to think it. Somebody else had to see it. Somebody else had to make it happen. And so I'm just calling all of us to that thinking. So.
Thank you, Dr. Dugan. So he said it's about being about it and doing it. So what you got to add to that, Reverend Dennis?
That brought to mind for me, go versus be. Going to church versus being the church. And I think that we're in a place now where we got to recognize and come to a day of reckoning that going is not enough. That Jesus does not just tell his disciples to go into all the world, but when he tells them to go into all the world, he gives them an assignment. Be my witnesses. Go, but be my witnesses. Do the work. And so we're at a place where I think many of our institutions historically have become where they started as movements of faith, they've become museums of faith. And so recognizing that at this juncture, it's not enough to just look at the pretty picture on the wall and say, wow, it was nice that they could paint. Now we're in a place where we can take out our paintbrush and our paint kit, and we can create. What is it that we desire this to look like in this generation? And so I think that it requires us to get organized, to align, to recognize those points where we can work together. Because as I said before, there are more areas where we can work together than there are differences and distinctions. Because at the end of the day, ICE is not shooting down just because you're a Baptist or just because you're a Methodist. It's the color of your skin. It's not just what side of town you grew up on or what denominational affiliation your great grandmother had. Um, they're indiscriminate on who is being prosecuted and persecuted in this day and age. And so, as the church, we got to realize that we've come entirely too far to be absent now. Why wait till now to be quiet when we've spent decades and generations and centuries galvanizing our voices and our resources to make a difference and an impact? And now, when it's most needed, we have to remember that we are literally the hands and the feet of Christ. If the need is going to be met, we have to be the ones to meet it. If this culture is going to change and shift, we have to be the conduits and the agents of that change. And so we got to be more serious. That liberation is not just a declaration, but it is our mentality, it is our mindset, it is our modality. It's how we're moving forward in the work. That I'm not just talking about liberation and justice, but we're being about liberation and justice. And I think at this juncture, it's critical for the church to recognize that it's not easy, but it's necessary. It's necessary work. That if we want better, we have to start now with making changes and transitions that will impact not just right now, but will impact future generations. As Dr. Dugan mentioned, it goes back to our thinking. Um, it's wonderful to build the church for you. It's wonderful. I commend those who desire to build a church for them. But this generation is raising the question, who's building the church for my grandchildren? And that does not start when they're born. That starts now. And so being a part of those conversations where we realize that church Instead of being temples, we have to go back to being tabernacles. We have to be willing to move. We have to be willing to follow the Spirit of God. We have to be willing to follow the leading of God's Spirit concerning God's people.
Wow. I just want y'all to know I got some chills coming from those last words, and I think they were very inspiring. And even though I am the moderator, I'm going to throw my 2 cents in on this conversation about the Black church and what it means to be transformational. We're not simply a keeper of tradition, but a cultivator of consciousness. We're not simply a place of refuge, but a builder of power, not simply a preacher of hope, but an architect of conditions where Black communities can live, lead, and flourish. This is what I've been taught, and this is what I understand from a womanist perspective, that the work is measured by wholeness, dignity, and justice, and the liberation of those who are often asked to carry both church and community on their backs. Those are my 2 cents for the conversation. And now I'd like to open up the floor for our audience to ask questions to the panelists. And you can type them in the chat or you can come off mute and I'll look for your hand. Wait, let me see if I can see everybody here. Yeah, I'll look for hands raised and we'll see if we can go with that. And Amal, you can help me on this because you know I'm operating from a phone and a laptop, so I'm doing the best I can over here.
I do think Patricia, I think you had your hand raised before, and if I don't know if you wanna you still die. Yeah, there we go. So I just unmuted you.
Mute myself, right? Can you hear me? Okay, so my first question is for Dr. Mitchell. If Black churches need to make reparations to the Black community, what percentage of those reparations should go to Black women who have essentially financed the Black church?
Now you're trying to get me in trouble. I'm already in trouble for saying that. Well, let's see. Well, I'm not good at math. So if we're talking about reparations, that means there has to be some math involved in terms of calculating what the percentages of what we gave and what it's worth today. I would literally just say maybe it's 75%. You know, I'm just throwing that number out there. But I don't, math is not my thing. But I would say a great portion of it should be, if it's reparations. And in the true sense of reparation, it means making up or restoring to what was not honored, in my opinion. And so I would definitely say at least around there.
I would
I'm not getting in trouble for that.
That sounds conservative to me.
Yeah. That's me. I don't know no math now. Somebody else has to do the math calculations. But yes, it certainly couldn't be 100%, but yeah, it could be though. It's a lot of making up.
Thank
Or
you.
restoring, should I say.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Patricia. I think Vanessa, I just unmuted you here.
You're muted. Okay.
Greetings, all. If we think about the same way that God took Ezekiel on the flyover over the valley of dry bones, if we're in a drone today, what are the dry and dead things that our churches, one each, that we need to abandon? And I'm asking that as a boomer myself, right? Particularly the places where the traditions almost overrun the spirit.
Ooh, that's heavy. Well, you know, I would always say that personality-driven churches, we need to let that go. We need to really let that go. And it needs to be a collective communal leadership, because what happens when the leader leaves, dies, or whatever happens, then all things fall apart. I mean, that's been our history. not just in the church, but in politics and a whole bunch of other arenas in our organizations. They've been built on personalities, and we need to let that go as a baby boomer. Anybody else? Dr. Dugan,
Well,
I see you on mic.
yeah.
I was waiting for Dr. Dennis to speak because he.
Another
Well,
person.
okay. I guess as the millennial of the group, I'll go. Um, I think that in addition to the personality driven, I think that we have to abandon our assumptions.
Mm,
We have a lot of assumptions about what this generation should know, how they should behave, how they should conduct themselves as it relates to the life of the Black church. But when they've been muted for so long, they feel unvalued in spaces where their contributions could really lead to a new lifeline for the church if we honored them as they are rather than being disappointed in them for not being what we thought they should be. We create space for a reimagining of what church can look like. And we also got to remember that every tradition started somewhere. Every stance that we see started somewhere. And so we must abandon the assumption that newborns are going to know how to change brakes. That's not how that works. At some point, somebody taught that mechanic how to change brakes, how to change the oil. And if you've not been intentional to teach it, then we must abandon the assumption that something is wrong with the generation for not knowing.
Mm. Mm. Thank
You know, if I were to start getting rid of stuff, I would look at the calendar. I mean, and I love church and I love all of the things that we do in church. But that anniversary that we've been doing for the last 750 years, why? Why are we doing that? And it used to be the church was packed. Now it's just 3 people come, but we still do it because it's tradition. And it's a hard thing to change tradition, but we have to step back and think about who was it that I think it was Dr. Dennis said we gotta, be building the church for our grandchildren, and they're not gonna want to celebrate that thing 50 years from now. So what what will they be doing? They won't be doing that. So maybe we should look at the calendar and we should, ask the kids, what would you do instead of this? Or what could we do that's different from the way we've been doing that? Why does everybody have to wear the same thing and march and do this? What? Okay, that's worn out. At one point, that was new, but now it's just tired. And the only people who are entertained are the people who are doing it. So I think it's really this, and I know it's hard because it's when it's a tradition, it's hard to even talk about changing it. But that's what we have to do because we're focused on maintaining what we have and not ministry outside of what we have that's going begging. It's not happening. And unless somebody in the church is willing to, somebody gonna have to die on the cross. What? You canceled that? That means the end of your ministry there. But somebody got to do that. There's got to be some disruption in order for change to happen. And unfortunately, it usually the disruption is one that that makes change happen is one that's unanticipated or one that we didn't plan for. The pastor passes away or the building burns down or something like that. Then people are willing to think about something new. we've gotta take the bull by the horns and realize, and it's hard. I know it's hard. I know if you serve the church as a pastor for 5 minutes, you know what I'm talking about is almost impossible to do. But that's what's necessary because we're sinking, and many churches, and Susan and I, we each of us talk to 50, 60 churches a year, and we see it. We see it. The age of the church is showing, and we're just pretending, and we're not even acknowledging that we're pretending. We really think we're doing it. And that we have to change that mindset. So
I think we have another question from Diane.
Good evening, and thank you, panel, for such wisdom. I listened to all of you. You talked about equality, and I went to Deuteronomy 25 and 15, and it says you must have accurate and honest weights and measures so that you may live long in the land of the Lord your God is giving you. And then I looked at my notes, what I jotted down. You talked about people from 1619 to the 1980s. And my thoughts were they had skills, they had history. History mattered, values, determination. They wanted growth, and people would wanted to belong. So, with saying that, what will the church today do to encourage those young people that don't want to do the things that the church was doing back then? What will you do to bring them on board? Maybe not to do it the way you do it, but to do it in a different way, but to keep the history, because history matters. History is where you came from, and history is where our Lord and Savior came from. So we don't want to get rid of that. We want to encourage them. So what is your thoughts about that?
So I raised my hand if I can jump in and try to share in this conversation. Um, I go back to the adage from, I think it's Swahili, and that is that the children or the youth will burn the village down if they're not provided warmth. And by that, I think it really means that it is the role of the community to uplift, to educate, to share, to nurture, and really develop the youth. And if we're not doing that in a meaningful way, then I think you're going to get the results of what you get. So, no, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and tradition does hold its place in the world that we live in, ritual and cultural practices and so forth. But I think really, I've heard it said by a couple of the other panelists. In so many ways, we have to get out of the way. Us baby boomers that like to hear the sound of our voices, that like to talk about and pontificate when I was a boy and what I used to do, walk up the hill backwards in 3 feet of snow. All that kind of stuff has kind of taken its course because the urgency of the times that we exist in now, you know, I think it really is important to one, to ask the young people what matters to them and what do they want to talk about and what do they want to be about, and have that partnership and that relationship so that we can build together. But I do think in some ways that we as adults might want to step back because we seem to think that we know it all. And here we are, how many thousands of years later, and we're spending billions of dollars a day dropping bombs, but we can't build schools, we can't build community centers, we can't build spaces where people can flourish. So I think we really kind of may want to give the reins over to perhaps our women folk, perhaps our young folk, perhaps, have a panel or a council of elders that can sit and, pontificate and give wisdom and advice. But I really do think it's time that we kind of let some other people step up to the plate.
Mhm. I would just add this to that, and I agree with you, uh, Brother Marshall. It's important to tell our story. It's important to talk about our history. It's important to lay a foundation for our young people. Um, and we don't often do that anymore. We know it's not happening in the schools. Um, and it's rarely happening in churches that we talk about our history from our own vantage point, not what somebody else is telling us it is, but for our own. But then it's also important that young people are able to freely add to that story, their story. I always think about um, running a race, and I ran track and loved the relays. And at some point, you have to pass the baton, but at some point, the person has to be ready to receive it. No baton passing works if it's not someone reaching both directions simultaneously to make a smooth transition. And so I think that's where, in some areas that we lack, we don't teach our children our history. We put them in front of the computer or the TV or whatever, and we leave it to that to do it, and we don't spend time with them. I sit on a board. I'm an organizing founder of Quilombo Academic and Cultural Institute that specifically not only do we talk about teach our children, the education pieces and all that kind of stuff, but we teach them history. But then we allow them to add to the history, and I think that's important. I mentioned that earlier that young people need to be a part of the leadership, not just sitting as a token, but a part of the decision-making process so that they learn how to be leaders, so that they learn how to voice their opinions, and they learn that they have authority and a voice that is adhered to. So I think opportunity is another thing we need to do, but we got to lay the foundation.
And if I could jump in, I think that we have to be open to new history being made.
Hmm.
Kind of along the lines of what you all are saying, that as much as we want new generations to learn our history, we must embrace theirs,
Yep.
because they have a story that matters as well. And so, along the lines of what Dr. Mitchell just mentioned, I can remember being a teenager, being invited to sit at tables that were way bigger than me, with seasoned leaders who were allowing me the space and the opportunity to be a voice in rooms that otherwise the door would be shut in. There were people in the room who wondered, why is the bishop allowing this little boy in this room to be a part of this conversation? Why is this pastor allowing this little boy to sit up here amongst the others? And now that I'm leaning into my leadership roles and responsibilities, even then, I didn't always understand why I was welcomed into the room. But now that I have to sit in those seats and fill those shoes, it makes it a lot easier. I was not excluded from certain conversations, but I was welcomed and my perspective was welcomed. I shared with Dr. Deegan and Dr. Mitchell in our prior, in our pre-meeting meeting, that I can recall being looked at sideways and strange for a graphic that I created for the denomination back then because it was innovative, if you will. But now it's become the standard. And so now you see direct replicas of that work being represented now, because the reality is just because it was new didn't mean that it was demonic. Even though it's different from what we've seen down through the years, doesn't mean that it goes against the grain. I grew up with a pastor who said, worship can be whatever you got, Worship can be whatever you guys imagine it to be. He just told us there were three things that you could not exclude. Do not exclude prayer, do not exclude an opportunity for somebody to meet Jesus, and do not exclude the offering. You can do whatever else you want to do, right? Do whatever else you want to do as long as it doesn't go against the purpose and the mission of who we are as church. And so realizing that history really wasn't history until it happened, right? And so making space for younger generations to lean into not just knowing where they've come from, but also opening our eyes to see what they see, because they sit where my great grandmother sat at the table from the perspective of one who was freed slave, or if you will, to one who now lives in that freedom. Their generations require them to see things completely different. And so embracing what they see and understanding that what oftentimes what they're seeing is the result of prayers that we prayed. So now if I ignore them living into the freedom of wearing jeans and tennis shoes to church, if I allow them to realize, like Paul said, that all things are lawful, but not everything is expedient, right? Learn helping them navigate those differences and distinctions, I think will help shift us into a place where we realize that we're building a new history together.
So with that in mind, is this where we take the offering? So I think we're going to let somebody from the Network for Developing Conscious Communities take over. As your moderator for this evening, I would just like to thank all the panelists for all their wonderful insights and conversations. This has been very enjoyable. And I'd like to thank all the participants in the audience who joined us this evening. And Ron or Mel, I'll let you take over. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael. You did a wonderful job navigating this conversation. It's a really important, integral topic, and all of our panelists, they did a great job, and it's a really imperative topic. And I'm glad that we touched on this topic, especially with the current political landscape and everything going on in community development. So with that, I really want to thank all the panelists, Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Dugan, Reverend Dale. Thank you so much. Michael, thank you so much for doing such a wonderful job in navigating this entire conversation, from making the discussion prompt so specific and catered towards each panelist, and really exploring new topics and fresh ideas. And with that, I also thank our audience members as well. I'll include the link for our upcoming webinar that we have coming up on April 6th. And that's also a really interesting topic. It's Black women leading the way in community development, sort of going across a little bit of our conversation today as well. So we're excited to see everyone for that conversation as well. It'll be the same time, with new panelists and obviously a new topic. So yeah, with that, I'll hand over the conversation to Ron Hans.
What can I say? I mean, this has been inspirational, motivational. I just what can I say? This could have been a series of discussions, not just 2 hours, but could have been a series of discussions. I thank all of you for what you bring and how you do what you do. Someone mentioned teaching, and this is what is what we do. This is a teachable moment, and so in teachable moments come learning experiences. And so again, I just want to thank all of you for your involvement, your participation, your willingness to share your insight, and let's not be strangers. Let's not be strangers. Let's continue to close the circle and expand the circle. So with that said, Amal, you can close us out.
We'll post the recording on YouTube as well. No list, we'll share it with you, and we'll share with all, and you can go ahead and share it with your networks. But with that, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.